Shortly before the Labour Party conference towards the end of September, Keir Starmer announced plans to introduce a compulsory digital ID system. This resurrection of a Blair-era idea sparked a lot of debate and public and political backlash, with politicians of all stripes distancing themselves from the idea, millions signing a petition in opposition, and public support for the idea falling in the aftermath of the announcement. So in this video, we're going to take another look at the digital ID proposal, why it hasn't gone down too well, and why it may be evidence that Starmer has the reverse Midas touch. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. We'll start with a brief recap of what the government's proposed digital ID actually is. The digital ID would be stored on your phone and include your name, date of birth, nationality or residency status, and a photo. It would be free and aims to improve access to public services by, quote, making it easier for everyone to quickly and easily prove their identity, as well as streamlining verification processes across private sectors too. Employers would also be required to check digital IDs as evidence of a person's right to work in the UK, with the goal of cracking down on illegal working by those in the country without legal status. As we said in our previous video following the announcement, which is linked in the description, there are plenty of European countries that already have some kind of national ID scheme, so it's not a particularly unique proposal. The drive to implement a national ID scheme was notably led by Tony Blair in the early 2000s. However, these plans, which faced opposition at the time, never came to fruition. Blair, however, has continued to push for a digital ID programme for years through his institute. Given the reaction to Starmer's announcement, he may have quite a fight on his hands if he's hoping to succeed where Blair failed. So let's take a look at the public and political reaction, starting with polling. Now, it's worth pointing out that prior to Starmer's announcement, polling suggested the public was in favour of some kind of national ID scheme. YouGov polling from June and Ipsos polling from July put support at 57% and opposition at 25% and 19% respectively. But polling since Starmer's announcement suggests that public support has collapsed. Shortly after the announcement, YouGov polling showed 45% were opposed to Starmer's proposal versus 42% who supported it. More in Common polling showed a wider gap, with 45% opposed and 31% supportive. Meanwhile, a parliamentary petition titled "Do Not Introduce Digital ID Cards," claiming that it would be a, quote, step towards mass surveillance and digital control, quickly received more than 2.8 million signatures. The political reaction couldn't really have been more negative either. Reform leader Nigel Farage came out against it, saying it would have no impact on immigration and was instead a means of controlling the population. Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey said it was nonsensical and a gimmick which the party would fight tooth and nail against. And the Greens leader Zach Palantir said it fit into a pattern of the Labour government cracking down on our rights, and that the plan was evidence-free and likely to discriminate against minorities. The Conservative response was slightly more generous, saying there were arguments for and against digital ID, but Tory leader Kemi Badenoch said she doubts Labour could be trusted to implement it. There have even been voices of dissent within Labour. Manchester Mayor and apparent Starmer rival Andy Burnham said he disagreed with the plans, while The Times reported that there was some cabinet backlash against it too. It's also notable that the 5 major parties in Northern Ireland, where the rollout of a compulsory digital British ID would be contentious, are united in opposition to it. The most surprising opposition, though, came from Palantir, the Trump-aligned US software giant that has contracts with the Ministry of Defence and the NHS, and was therefore considered a potential bidder for the scheme. The company's UK boss said it would not seek to be involved, criticising the plan as something that was not in Labour's manifesto and without clear public support. It's worth pointing out, though, that it's understood that the government expects the digital ID to be designed, built and run by an in-house team. So what are the implications of all of this? For starters, it's clear from the fall in polling alone that the government's communication strategy surrounding this proposal has been a failure. In his announcement, Starmer framed the digital ID scheme as a strategy to tackle illegal immigration and the so-called shadow economy, which one can deduce is part of his effort to close the polling gap with Farage's reform. The problem is, though, it's not a particularly strong argument. Yes, employers will have to check digital IDs to ensure potential employees have legal status and the right to work, but they're already required to carry out right-to-work checks using national insurance numbers. An unscrupulous employer who doesn't abide by the existing system is unlikely to fall in line with a new one. That being said, the fact that digital IDs will have photos attached will make it easier for law-abiding employers to ensure the person in question isn't borrowing or stealing someone else's national insurance number. Nevertheless, the government may have had an easier time selling the idea if it was framed as a way to make life easier for ordinary people and further improve and streamline the government's digital services, which are perhaps the strongest arguments in favour. For instance, no more tracking down your passport, birth certificate, driving licence or utility bills when trying to verify your identity for various public and private sector services. These are arguments the government has made, but has definitely not put at the centre of its pitch. While a public consultation on the proposal is still to come, and the idea is for the system to be rolled out by the next election, the announcement itself just seemed to be a bit rushed. Remember, this was not in Labour's manifesto, and the government seemingly ruled out introducing ID cards as recently as July. Nevertheless, even if the announcement had been better planned and executed, it's not even clear that this would have helped much. Commentators have pointed out that the backlash to the digital ID announcement is a symptom of Starmer's reverse Midas touch, i.e. the idea that his endorsement of a policy makes it unpopular, even if it had public approval beforehand. Whether you support or oppose digital ID cards, you can likely see that reintroducing what has historically been a contentious policy at a time when the Prime Minister's favourability is already at an all-time low is probably a bit of a tactical misstep. And if this reverse Midas touch theory is true, it poses a major problem for Starmer going forward, in that the public's negative view of him is going to drag down their perception of any decision, whether good or bad, that he makes, making the already difficult job of being Prime Minister even harder. You know as well as us that in the current climate, it's important to stay sharp, and perhaps even more important to be precise. Well, our sponsor this week, Henson Shaving, know this better than anyone, and take pride in their precision. That's because their razor perfectly holds the blade at a 30-degree angle and extends it only 0.0013 inches, less than the width of a human hair, which means incredibly tight tolerances, very high standards, and superb precision. This also results in a much healthier shave compared to the overpriced plastic razor cartridges that leave your skin feeling sore and mistreated. Speaking of plastic, you probably don't realise, but over 2 billion plastic razors are thrown into landfill each year in the US alone. So not only are they wildly expensive, they're also terrible for the environment. The same can't be said for Henson though, as their razors are completely plastic-free. From the blade to the box, everything Henson ships out to you is entirely recyclable. Henson strives to protect your skin in a way that's accessible, affordable, and kind to the environment. And while it may sound intimidating, changing the blades yourself, it's actually remarkably easy to do, and even kind of satisfying taking full control of your shave. If you've been meaning to try out Henson, there's no better time to start than right now, as we're offering you 100 free blades with your purchase when you use the code TLDR at checkout. Just go to hensonshaving.com/TLDR or click the link in the description, and you'll be on your way to a healthier shave.